Vishal is a co-founder of Dream a Dream, a widely recognized non-governmental organization from India dedicated to empowering children and young people from vulnerable backgrounds to overcome adversity and flourish in the 21st century by using creative life skills. Dream a Dream works with 10,000 young people a year through its 2 innovation labs, after school life skills program, and Career Connect program. Over the years, it has also trained over 8,000 educators, indirectly impacting over 200,000 children and young people. And through its happiness curriculum, which it delivers in partnership with the Delhi government, it has reached over 1 million children. Now, in addition to being a social entrepreneur, Vishal has also been recognized for his thought leadership, co-authoring a peer-reviewed paper along with Drs. Pearson and Kennedy, titled The Life Skills Assessment Scale, Measuring the Life Skills of Disadvantaged Children in the Developing World. 2 years ago, their work was recognized as one of the top 100 global K-12 innovations by 100.org. Now, at the heart of Vishal's work is the belief that if we can reimagine learning to develop empathy, creative thinking, problem solving, and collaborative working skills amongst young people, they will be able to overcome adversity and flourish in this fast-changing world. And that is why, in the current context, I can think of no better place for us to start than to hear from Vishal. Vishal, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Stavros. Thank you, Dr. Asma, and thank you, Dominic, for inviting me to be part of this amazing convening. It's a huge honor. I want to start by saying Namaste, which is an Indian greeting, which basically means that the divine in me respectfully recognizes the divine in you. I want to deeply acknowledge the interconnectedness that this pandemic and this crisis has brought about among the human race and among the human race and other species and the planet itself. We are all in this together and trying to respond to this crisis from a space of collaboration and deeper understanding. So it's a huge honor for me to be part of this. Thank you very much. I think we know the numbers. We know how education for over 1 billion children has been impacted because of this pandemic. So I don't want to go into the numbers, but I want to probably bring in from stories from the ground, specifically from the global south. I'm based in India, and over the last 4 to 6 weeks, we have been talking to young people on the ground in the communities that we work in both urban and rural communities, and listening to what's coming up for us, what's coming up for young people as they are making sense of this crisis. And this is how, in their own words, education seems to have gotten disrupted. Young people across the board are feeling tremendous amounts of anxiety. They're coming back to us and asking questions around, will school reopen at all? When will school reopen? Will my examinations happen? Will I be pushed to the next grade, or will I have to repeat an entire grade? Children in many of the communities that we work with, which are largely very vulnerable communities, have suddenly been expected to act like adults. Their parents have lost livelihood opportunities, income sources, largely because parents are daily wage earners. So children have been forced to provide stability, many cases emotional stability in the family to their younger siblings, and be carers and providers and decision makers in the family. And they're not ready for this role. There's a lot of confusion that young people are currently experiencing because there is very little and very contradictory information about the pandemic itself. There's fake news, which is causing fear, which is leading to many questions. There's anxiety around, will my parents stay alive? Will they be dying? What will I do if I lose my parents? How will I take care of myself and my siblings and life? This pandemic has also caused children to lose the safe spaces that they had. Many of the children that we work with come from families and neighborhoods that are violent and abusive. The homes are very small, usually just 10 feet by 10 feet homes. And now, because everyone is stuck at home, they're not allowed to step out because of the lockdown. If they're in an abusive home or a home which has violence, then they have nowhere to escape. Parents have lost livelihoods, which has really put their future into grave risk. They have immediate needs to meet because many families do not have savings. They live on hand-to-mouth subsistence. Uh, Parents are worried about how will they arrange for school fees for the children in the coming year, how will they pay for rent, how will they take care of their debts. Will children have to be dropped out of school because they're unable to organize school fees? Will they let go of their homes because they are unable to organize rent? And beyond all this, there is this daily crisis of hunger. Access to food and provisions itself has gotten limited in the lockdown that we are experiencing. Uh, their ability to even access the ability to cook food in their homes has been limited now. Most of the children and young people we spoke to are eating only one meal a day. Usually school used to provide a meal a day, and that has stopped now, which has caused tremendous hunger in the communities. A big challenge and a crisis that we are seeing in India specifically is that as we went into lockdown as a country, uh, huge populations of daily wage earners who are working in urban areas decided to migrate back to their villages. If you've heard the news, you would have seen thousands of families carrying kids on their shoulders, walking hundreds of kilometers to get back to their villages with nothing in their hand. This migration is going to disrupt education for children because we don't know if children are going to come back to the cities, their families are going to come back to the cities, which means we don't know if they're going to join school. So we might see a huge dropout of kids because of this migration. There is definitely loss of learning. While there has been an amazing response of digital resources that have been made available for children across the board, we do recognize that 80% of the populations that we work with don't have access to internet, to smartphones, to computers, to access digital resources. Even if they have access to a smartphone, their families, because of loss of income, don't have money to recharge their phones. In many cases in villages, they don't have access to uninterrupted supply of electricity, limited bandwidths, which has impacted their ability to engage even with online learning or digital learning. We do see a big disruption happening in girls' education because of this. One is the anxiety and stress itself, but in a crisis like this, when we come out of this crisis and children start coming back to school because there are going to be limited incomes that families have, they're going to deprioritize girls' education. And they're going to be expecting girls to stay back at home and take care of younger siblings as parents go out to seek new income sources. There's, of course, the challenge of abuse and violence that the girls are facing now because of the lockdown. When we look at adolescence itself, the big challenge is adolescents are stressed about their future, about job opportunities of the future, whether they'll be able to complete their education. There's a sense of loneliness that adolescents are feeling because they're not connected to their friends, to their support systems, to their teachers. A majority of the adolescents use this summer break that happens in India now to earn additional income by doing odd jobs. That income source has been stopped now. And usually this income source is very valuable for families and also for these young people to pay for their school fees. And that source has now been stopped. The result of all of this and the disruption in education and the stress and anxiety that this crisis has caused in the lives of children and young people has resulted in long-term impact of trauma, a sense of helplessness, hopelessness. There's a strong response of suicidal tendencies among young people, resulting in short-term and long-term failure to thrive. And the impact of this is going to be tremendous on young people and their populations. Now, having said that, how education has been disrupted largely for young people in Global South and countries like India, as we start looking at this, understanding this crisis and its immediate impact and the long-term impact on children and their education and learning, one of our big reflections has been that the crisis also presents an opportunity to us to transform and reimagine education. Now, as we entered the 21st century, we started talking about reimagining education for all children to help them prepare for an uncertain, complex future. Well, the future is here now. The uncertainty, the complexity, the volatility of the future is happening right now in the lives of young people. So this gives us an opportunity to reimagine the core purpose, the design, the approach, the outcomes, and the delivery models of education itself. The important questions that we can reflect on is what young people need to learn, how they need to learn, where they learn, and when they learn. Some of the insights that we have been reflecting on around this reimagination of education has been that we need to move from the traditional linear model of education, which is preparing kids for a workforce, which is extractive, to now moving kids to prepare them for this world of anxiety and uncertainty and volatility. That is also pushing us to redefine what does the role of education and success of education really mean. If you go back and understand why the crisis happened, it has happened because somewhere down the line we got disconnected as a human species, not just from each other, but also from other species, and most importantly, from the planet. So as we look to redefine what does the success of education mean, the role of education is no longer just creating workforce of the future, but is really around helping children and young people move towards ideas of thriving. Thriving that is not only individual focused, but thriving that also brings together communities, societies, and helps the planet to thrive. Some of the ways the role of education is no longer just creating workforce of the future, but is really around helping children and young people move towards ideas of thriving. Thriving that is not only individual focused, but thriving that also brings together communities, societies, and helps the planet to thrive. Some of the ways the role of education is no longer just creating workforce, but is really around helping children and young people. Why is it repeating? Thriving that is not only individual focused, but that also brings together communities, society, and helps the planet to thrive. So some of the ways we are seeing education show up in India and how it's responding to the current crisis. One important way we have seen is the happiness curriculum used in the Delhi government 2 years back. It's been running now for 2 years. And the design of the happiness curriculum was around focusing on well-being of children through mindfulness practices, through storytelling and play-based experiential approaches. And what we have seen is now the curriculum itself has been running for 2 years in about 1,024 schools with 800,000 children from grade 1 to grade 8, where each child gets a 35-minute session of a happiness curriculum every single day, usually starting the school day with a happiness class. And as we reached out to some of the children and teachers who had been through this program for the last 2 years to understand how that has helped them in this current crisis, what has been heartening to note is that the mindfulness practices have really helped children stay grounded and stable in this crisis. They have introduced some of these mindfulness practices to their parents and other children in the neighborhood, and has created a sense of calm in their homes and communities. Teachers themselves have used the happiness classes to, one, bring more calm and stability into their own lives and in the lives of their families, but also be able to reach out to children in their communities. The Delhi government has now introduced an interactive response system whereby parents can just give a missed call to a number, and that number will call them back and give them sessions from the happiness curriculum that they can do with their children at home. And there's been a huge uptake of this model in the current crisis. The second has been Dream a Dream over the last 20 years has focused on developing life skills and social emotional competencies in children from vulnerable backgrounds. And we are beginning to see how an investment in this is helping children and young people in our programs today deal with this crisis with a lot more stability and calm. We're seeing young people show up in leadership positions. We've seen young people look at the crisis that the community is facing, step up and become community leaders. They have rallied around the communities, brought together politicians, relief workers, social activists to provide relief and rehabilitation into their communities. We had two young people who came together and started setting up simple videos which could be shared through WhatsApp in the communities around giving them information about the COVID crisis and giving them information about how they could make masks at home and sharing correct information about the crisis among young people in the communities. We had one young woman whose father had a stroke while this crisis and the lockdown was going on. She took leadership in her family. She got her father admitted. They didn't have money to pay for the operation. She rallied support from from her peers, peer networks, from people in her workplace, raised money for her dad's operation. While she did lose her father to the operation, to the surgery, she showed tremendous leadership, calm, sensitivity, and empathy, not just towards herself, her family, but also towards the health system. And this is how we're beginning to see young people show up using the life skills, using the social emotional competencies that they've developed in this crisis. What we are also seeing is teachers are showing up in a whole different way. An interesting and heartening piece of how teachers are reimagining education in this crisis is the majority of the teachers that we work with in communities, specifically in semi-urban and rural communities, come from the communities where the children stay. So while schools are closed, teachers are stepping up, showing up in these communities to support children emotionally. They're creating safe spaces for children to come and share their anxieties and stress, creating spaces of listening and validation, and supporting children through this crisis emotionally. I want to quote Andres Schleicher from OECD about what he sees as the role of teachers as we come out of this crisis, which I believe is extremely critical. We do believe that teachers are really being the warriors and showing leadership in this crisis in the communities. And as we come back with schools reopening and education being reimagined, we believe education needs to focus on culture where teachers are encouraged to be leaders, designers of innovative learning environments, co-creators, facilitators, and coaches for students. Systems need to invest in building entrepreneurial mindset and spirit of teachers, giving more agency to teachers, giving them more trust, and decentralized power to teachers so that they can respond to their context. And as I bring this keynote to a close, my invitation to all of us is, while we are looking at this crisis and responding to it, the invitation also is, let's take the great pause. Let's invite stillness into our being. Let's allow for emergence of an answer from deep within our being. These are early days, We are still beginning to understand the impact of this crisis as it's happening on young people and children and in the communities that we are working in. So let's invite stillness. Let's allow for emergence to come. The answers are there, the answers will come. When we go still, the answers will come. A crisis like this is an invitation to pause for just a moment longer and respond with the answer that will emerge. And that is the real invitation. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Vishal, for that very, very insightful and enlightening talk to kick us off. What, as I reflect on what you said, I have three main takeaways. The first is how you began your keynote by relaying to us some of the experiences from the ground in India in particular. And I think what that has done has highlighted the inherent trade-offs that we're making at the moment between personal security, shall we say, through the lockdown and the security of our health versus economic security. And while for many of us on this conference, that seems like a no-brainer, of course we're going to prioritize public health over economic security. I think for many people, particularly day laborers and people who live hand to mouth, this is not an easy trade-off to be making. And I think the longer this lockdown carries on, the more acute that trade-off is going to become. And so I do think we need, in the deliberations that are going to follow, to think very clearly and dispassionately about these trade-offs and to not be afraid to tackle the difficult choices that we're going to be confronted with. The next takeaway that I noted and that I appreciated very much is you did a very good job, I think, of highlighting the links between education and other domains. The way I like to think about optimal education is I think of it as sort of three concentric circles. The inner circle is the self and an understanding of the self. The middle circle is really understanding interpersonal, human-to-human interactions. And then the outer circle is really understanding how the self and human-to-human interactions fit within a broader ecosystem. And I think what you've done very nicely is actually highlight the fact that our education system has been traditionally, or maybe in this present moment, or just before this present moment, been almost obsessed with just one dimension of that interpersonal human-to-human space, and that's the economic and the world of work. And we've neglected, firstly, all the other ways that we human beings interact with one another, culture being the most obvious, but also family and society and community. But we've also really almost have very little to say about a true and deep understanding of the self, and how our actions as individuals and as communities impact our broader ecosystem, whether it's other species, the planet. All of those are critically important. And so I want to echo your appeal that we take this opportunity to rethink what education means along all of those dimensions. And finally, I do agree with you that if there is a silver lining, and it is, in my view, only a lining, unfortunately, but it's there and we should take this opportunity, is that as we have time to reflect, let's use that time constructively. Let's invite the stillness. I know it's very much a part of your cultural tradition, the idea of stillness. It also has roots in parts of my cultural tradition, classical Greek philosophy, and in particular Stoicism, that invites people to reflect deeply and to think calmly. Let's use this time constructively, so that when we do come out of this, and we will come out of this, we emerge in a stronger and fairer community, global community. So with that, I note that we are a little over our time. Vishal, I want to offer you the last word, if you will, before we hand over to the next session.
Thank you, Stavros, for this beautiful summary. Really appreciate again this opportunity, and I'm really excited by this coming together, this collaboration we're doing through this convening, and hoping that together we can find the answers that we seek for all the children in the world. So thank you very much.